j'ai du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
All this as major elements of the Atlantic's reporting that the president made disparaging remarks about U.S. soldiers and war casualties have been confirmed by other news organizations. His disinterest in finding captured soldiers has now been reported by the Washington Post and the New York Times. His discomfort with wounded veterans now confirmed by the New York Times. His asking, what's in it for them, while standing with John Kelly at his son's grave, has been reported by the Associated Press and the Washington Post. The claim that the president didn't want to visit an American military cemetery in France in 2018 because it was, quote, filled with losers, was also reported by the AP. Sources also told the Post and the Times that the president questioned the intelligence of those who served in Vietnam because, unlike him, they didn't find a way to dodge service. And this is what national security reporter for Fox News, Jennifer Griffin, confirmed.
I've spoken with two senior U.S. officials who were on the trip to France who confirmed to me key details in the Atlantic article and the quotes attributed to the president. My source, a former Trump administration official, told me when the president spoke about the Vietnam War, he said it was a stupid war. Anyone who went was a sucker. The president would say about American veterans, what's in it for them? They don't make any money. The source said it was a character flaw of the president. He could not understand why someone would die for their country. Not worth it. Regarding the French trip to mark the end of World War I, according to this former official, the president was not in a good mood. French President Macron had said something that made him mad. He questioned why he had to go to two cemeteries. Why do I have to do two? Regarding the president's July 4th military parade planning, during a planning session at the White House after seeing the Bastille Day parade in 2017, President Trump said regarding the inclusion of wounded guys, quote, that's not a good look. Americans don't like that.
Meanwhile, the president yesterday continued to deny the report that he has disparaged the military, while at the same time criticized military leadership.
The story is a hoax. He made up the story. It's a totally made-up story. Who would say a thing like that? Only an animal would say a thing like that. There's nobody that has more respect for not only our military, but for people that gave their lives in the military. I'm not saying the military is in love with me. The soldiers are. The top people in the Pentagon probably aren't, because they want to do nothing but fight wars so that all of those wonderful companies that make the bombs and make the planes and make everything else stay happy. I said, that's good. Let's bring our soldiers back home. Some people don't like to come home. Some people like to continue to spend money. One cold-hearted globalist betrayal after another.
I really don't know
so painful.
What to say about that. It just complete ignorance of the men and women who run our military. You know, David Ignatius, and you know this better than anybody, I found in my years on the Armed Services Committee, when we were getting briefings from generals and admirals, military leaders, they were the last ones who wanted to go into war. Famously, Dwight Eisenhower loathed war because he had seen it so much. He was always the voice of caution. He was always the one trying to tell politicians before he was in the White House to send people to war. It is said that after the Korean War that he inherited, not another American soldier died in combat in the remaining years of his presidency. He gave the warning, the military-industrial complex. He knew that civilians like Donald Trump in the presidency getting too close to war profiteers and getting too close to, as Donald Trump has done with a lot of military companies, could cause potential problems. But David, even Colin Powell, who of course is only remembered for what happened at the UN, George W. Bush was asked why he didn't seek Colin Powell's counsel more on the second Iraq war, and he said, because I knew he was against it. I knew he didn't want us to go in there. And of course, it was Colin Powell who had that famous showdown with our dear friend Madeleine Albright, talking about toy soldiers, saying, again, the general who had been through Vietnam, as so many of these generals had been through Vietnam. No, war is a last resort. And David, haven't you found that time and time again, as Donald Trump insults our men and women in uniform, that it is the generals, it is the admirals who have seen war, who are the last ones who want to go back there?
Joe, you put it exactly right. There's a deep conservatism and caution among people who've had to order their troops into battle and have had to pick them up off that battlefield. Just think about the little soundbite we heard from yesterday. Put aside Jeffrey Goldberg's superb reporting about what Trump said in the past. Put aside Jen Crandall's confirmation, as we just heard, the Fox News reporter who found these same terms, military suckers for having gone to Vietnam, to Trump's reluctance to go to the military. Put all that aside and just listen to what he said yesterday on camera. He essentially accused our military leadership of putting young men and women in harm's way, exposing them to violence and death to serve the interests of war profiteers. It's really an incredible comment. If you want to take an instance of Donald Trump's contempt for the men and women who run our military, you don't have to go any further than what he said on camera yesterday. And it's of a pattern. In my reporting over the last 4 years, I travel often with the military. I would have been with the Central Command commander today if things had gone out worked out the way we hoped. I have heard more and more people who wanted to give Trump every benefit of the doubt, who were happy to have Trump exercise less authority, less insistence, fewer meetings in the Situation Room. They like that. And for the first few months, they really prospered under it. But the military saw something in Donald Trump. I think of it as a culture clash. They saw somebody who came from this instrumental world of New York real estate, where everything's a deal, everything's a transaction, and the military, with its culture of professionalism, of sacrifice, just didn't get it. And I think the division began to widen starting in 2017. It's gotten worse and worse. And again, let's not quarrel over Jeffrey Goldberg's quotes. Let's just listen to what the president said yesterday, and you'll know the essence of the contempt he feels for the military.
It is Tuesday, the 8th of September of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world, and it does, and has. Whole societies, whole cultures have been uprooted because of it. All of it. Yes, indeed. Okay, not so much the Spanish paprika, surprisingly, but for some reason the Hungarian paprika, people decided, hey, let's take over the world for this. It was their military-industrial complex. What is Trump doing invoking Eisenhower? Trump wouldn't call Eisenhower a commie because that's what Roy Cohn called him. And, Roy Cohn was Donnie's mentor until Donnie found out he was gay. And then he left him out to dry. Actually, I think he probably suspected. And then, when old Roy Cohn was dying of AIDS, that's when Donald Trump pulled a Roy Cohn on Roy Cohn. And good riddance. Not to say that, well, let's just put it this way. Trump has had an arc to his life, and Roy Cohn is just one more part of that arc. And it's all part of a whole, indeed. So, do we expect somebody that is a monster? The guy projects so much. He just tells you everything. Only a monster would say that, would call the troops suckers and losers. Well, yeah. Yeah, I guess so. As it was expressed at the top, more outlets are confirming exactly that. Okay, well, he can lie to us. He lies to us right after he does something. He'll say, I didn't do that. I didn't say that. And it's right there on tape. Minutes, seconds sometimes after he does it. Yeah. Oh, I do not want to go off on Horatio Hornblower's Adderall problem and whatever is coming out of his nose, Horatio Hornblower. Admiral, by the way, of the Navy that sinks. Yes, okay. So, do all those people, they got a tax break to buy those little pleasure crafts. And that's what they are. They're not yachts. It's pleasure craft. The technical term is pleasure craft. Anyway, what kind of break are they going to get when they have to fish them out from the bottom of the lake or a river or wherever they sink? Estuaries, maybe out in the open ocean. Oh, my God. All right, well, that's what happens when new money buys boats. You get a bunch of new boaters, and they don't know how. Apparently, they just don't know how. And if they do, they don't care. That's exactly what the yachting community, and I'm going to say yachting community because pleasure craft, come on. The sailboat community, the sailing community, the motor pleasure craft yacht community, I got to say, are not very patient with idiots, like the type that fly their flags on their boats. And I'm going to call them boats because we usually wouldn't ever use that term, vessel. Okay, but these people are driving boats because they have no idea what they're doing, obviously, and they don't know anything about resonance waves in lakes or even in rivers. And I'll mention it one more time. There's a reason there's a 5-mile-per-hour speed limit when motoring, because it throws a wake out. That wake hits the shore, bounces back, and causes chop. And some people get swamped, capsized, and sunk in that. But in Trump world, everybody's going to do what they want to do, and you can't stop them, even when they sink their neighbors. And they all say, oh, we're such a great community. We're not racist. We care for everybody. Get out of my way. They care so much for the community. I got some kid in the middle of the night revving his dirt bike and using it as a mode of transportation in the middle of the night, I guess to run to 7-Eleven, I don't know, get some chips, and then come back revving this loud thing, after the bars are closed. Now, I understand if it's your only mode of transportation, but hey, can you muffle your muffler, please? Please. Yikes. Oh, I should mention, major news, breaking, we had a power outage here in the region. Everything was out, not just houses. Oftentimes when the power goes out, the street lights will remain on. And this one, everything was off. Went off right around bar closing time. So this kid that was transporting himself for a early morning, late night run to 7-Eleven or Circle K, I think is what it is, Circle K. Or maybe it's AM PM. It's wherever it's AM PM. It's where the little, what they used to call Arco. Do they still have that? Is it still an Arco anyway? Oh, no. Yeah, I think that's an Arco there. And so the kid ran there because that's the only thing open. And he came back, and then sometime around 2:15 local time, a little bit later, then the power went out. It was out for a couple of hours. So Gunner, the English Bulldog, didn't get much sleep. He was agitated last night, not just with the kid on the motorcycle. He doesn't like motorcycles, and I don't blame him. But I think there were animals, massive amounts of smoke, too. Have to close in the house and breathe filtered air. Thank God we have filtered air. There are some that don't. In fact, some are being helicoptered out of reservoirs as we speak because they're going to suffocate from all the bad air if the flames don't burn them to a crisp. And that, I'm all over the place, but I don't know. It's a stream of consciousness. That fire was started by a gender reveal party using pyrotechnics during fire season. I'll get it out. And had no idea that it might cause a fire. Oh, we thought it was just a smoke machine. It's a little fireworks. Which also reminds me, some fool, after that news had actually been distributed, I'll get it out. I didn't get much sleep. I apologize. But some fool yesterday was shooting out in this semi-wilderness area, but bone dry. And what are they doing? I mean, that's how forest fires get started, and it's not too far. It's not too far from, our little town, suburban neighborhood. Damn them! How dare they? Like I said, maggots and boats don't care about anything or anyone else, and people who are maggots shooting guns during fire season, so that the ricochet can start a spark and start a wildfire. They don't care. Jeez. They probably think it'll get rid of that damn spotted owl. I'm still hearing this. A spotted owl is the reason we have all these problems. If those damn liberals hadn't tried to save that spotted owl, we wouldn't have these wildfires. Really now. Okay. Well, they're living in some QAnon bubble. The Proud Boys, 3%ers, and QAnon types descended upon the Oregon State Capitol yesterday and proceeded to beat up Black Lives Matter protesters. And the cops did make a couple of arrests. Unfortunately, and when I say our, I mean us as a great progressive liberal whole, we have some great journalists on the ground, and the one that I like to say our journalist on the ground, photojournalist Sergio Olmos, had some great photographs of these arrests, videos of these arrests, and then the cops taking him to a fairly, shielded, shaded area, talked to him for about an hour and let him go with hugs and a bro handshake. Now get out of here, you cute little thing. Come back and help us later. Wow. Yeah. Proud Boys took poles and sticks and beat not very big Black Lives Matter people. Chased them down right in front of the state capitol for the world to see. And then they're let go. Okay. Thanks for the help. We have it here. We have it from here on out. Thanks. And I guess we're going to have to purge the police departments after November 3rd, too. Okay? We'll be continuing to wear the masks, but I think that we need to get rid of racist, Nazi, KKK cops out of every single police department. Every single one. And if they happen to be the sheriff, if they happen to be the police chief, if you're an Oath Keeper sheriff, goodbye. You are a part of a terrorist organization. You have somehow infiltrated our police departments, and you will be held and dealt with accordingly. After all, this is America, and we do believe in law and order now, don't we? Yes, we do. Yeah, it's going to be great when Trump tries to continue on with this. He's the law and order president, and Joe Biden isn't. Already polling is showing that people like Joe's approach to law and order a lot more than Trump's crime cartel. Yeah, make up the law, and you better follow their orders. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, actually, after much criticism because of the Breonna Taylor killing, a black woman will lead Kentucky's Louisville Metro Police Department for the first time that's ever happened. Well, Brad Parscale is ripped for pulling just an amazing grift, as the Trump campaign is almost broke. Well, I don't think it's just Brad. I think Trump, and we all know, Trump's been putting a lot of money in his own pocket, and that's why he had to have the RNC at the White House. He's out of money. And former FBI agent Peter Strzok writes that Trump was badly compromised in 2016. Indeed, and we all know that, but no wonder they tried to get, and did, get rid of Peter Strzok. After the break, we move to the chef's table where almost 300 Rohingya Muslims were found on a beach in Indonesia's Aceh province after 7 months at sea on one boat. And the Belarusian opposition activist kidnapped by authorities last week ripped up her passport to avoid being deported at the Ukrainian border just this morning. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Associated Press Anonymous Worker Bees bring us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. For the first time, a black woman will lead Kentucky's Louisville Metro Police Department, which has been heavily criticized since officers fatally shot Breonna Taylor in March. Mayor Greg Fisher announced that Yvette Gentry will serve as interim chief of the department. Gentry is a former Louisville Metro Police deputy chief who retired from the force in 2014. She will be the first woman and the third African American to serve as chief of the Louisville Metro Police. Interim Chief Robert Schrader plans to retire at the end of September after 4 months in the role. Schrader took over on June 1st when Fisher fired longtime Chief Steve Conrad after learning officers did not have body cameras turned on during the fatal police shooting of the owner of a popular West End eatery. Yeah, that's right. That was a guy who actually fed the cops on a regular basis. He was a pillar in the community, and they shot him on his doorstep. How nice. Because they thought that he had a gun. Gentry's appointment comes at a low point in relations between police and black residents in Louisville. Protesters have marched for more than 100 consecutive days since Taylor, a 26-year-old black emergency medical technician, was shot and killed as officers attempted to serve a no-knock search warrant at her apartment. Protesters want serious changes to the city's police and other systems they say have perpetuated systemic racism. Now, the cops have done everything that they could in the midst of this. She was not the target of the no-knock warrant. She was collateral, or what's known as a soft target. Give her a little bit of a scare. Maybe they'll be able to scare up the perp they're looking for. And in many cases, these no-knock warrants are just coming to a neighbor's house because the cops made a mistake. And then the mistake they made in this situation is that a 26-year-old woman was shot multiple times in her own apartment when these guys broke into it. And then to cover it up, they went to the person who was the charging perp on the warrant and tried to cut a deal to implicate Breonna Taylor in a crime because they shot her dead and they needed to cover it up. So good. As an interim chief, will she have the power to get rid of the bad apples? Bob Brigham of Raw Story brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Donald Trump re-election strategist Brad Parscale, I like to say Parscale, was widely mocked on Labor Day after a new bombshell report in the New York Times on his campaign facing a cash crunch after already blowing $800 million. You know, that's almost a bill. Brad Parscale, the former campaign manager, liked to call Trump's re-election war machine an unstoppable juggernaut. But interviews with more than a dozen current and former campaign aides and Trump allies, and a review of thousands of items in federal campaign filings show that Trump's campaign and the RNC developed some profligate habits as they burn through hundreds of millions of dollars. Since Bill Stepien replaced Parscale in July, the campaign has imposed a series of belt-tightening measures that have reshaped initiatives, including hiring practices, travel restrictions, and the advertising budget. Under Mr. Parscale, more than $350 million, almost half of the $800 million spent, went to fundraising operations as no expense was spared in finding new donors online. The campaign assembled a big and well-paid staff and housed the team at a cavernous, well-appointed office in the Virginia suburbs. Outsized legal bills were treated as campaign costs. Well, that's Trump. And more than $100 million was spent on the television advertising blitz before the party convention, the point when most of the electorate historically begins to pay close attention to the race, the newspaper noted. Parscale attempted to deflect blame to the family in an interview with the newspaper. I ran the campaign the same way I did in 2016, which also included all of the marketing strategy and expenses under the very close eye of the family, Parscale said. No decision was made without their approval. Still, Parscale is receiving criticism. Veteran GOP strategist Ed Rollins blasted Parscale for spending like a drunken sailor. If you spend $800 million and you're 10 points behind, I think you've got to answer the question. What was the game plan? Rollins explained. You know, I failed to mention earlier that Kelly Lincoln takes care of the chat room and so much more, and Tom takes care of @NetRoots Radio on Twitter and so much more, and that if you go to our Patreon link that's at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you could become a recurring Patreon and help us pay our bills so that we don't get hauled in and forced to deport to some other country because they don't like what we're doing. And your generosity prevents that. Oh, thank you. And I also failed to mention that you can pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. So now I have. All right. Alex Henderson from Alternet brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Former FBI agent Peter Strzok, who was removed from Special Counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation in July of 2017 because of texts critical of Trump and fired by the FBI in 2018, is still under fire from Trump's sycophants. Or is it sycophants? They will insist that his new book, Compromised, Counterintelligence and the Threat of Donald J. Trump, has no validity, but it won't keep him quiet. Outside of the Trumpian bubble, those who followed Mueller's probe carefully will want to hear what Strzok has to say, even if they are critical of some of his actions. And Strzok maintains that Trump, as the book's title indicates, was compromised during the 2016 election. NBC News reporters Ken Dillian and Hallie Jackson explained that in Compromised, Strzok reveals no new evidence that Trump acted as a tool of Russia, but his insider account provides a detailed refutation of the notion that a group of anti-Trump denizens of the deep state cooked up the Russia hoax, as Trump likes to call it, to take down a president they didn't support. To the contrary, as he tells it, career public servants inside the FBI and the Justice Department were gobsmacked in 2016 by what they uncovered about a presidential campaign that seemed to find unlimited time to meet with Russians, practically inviting exploitation by a foreign adversary. Released in 2019, the Mueller report concluded that the Trump campaign's interactions with the Russians in 2016 did not rise to the level of a full-fledged criminal conspiracy, but the Mueller report wasn't the total exoneration that Trump and William Barr claimed it was. Strzok, Delaney and Jackson note, believes that Trump was badly compromised in 2016, even though he did not formally conspire with Russians who interfered in the election. Trump was compromised, Strzok writes, because of his questionable business dealings, the hush money paid on his behalf to silence women, shady transactions at his charity, and most importantly, his lies about his Russia dealings. Yes, lies, including his secret 2015 effort to build a Trump Tower in Moscow, even as he told the world that he had no business with Russia. Frank Figliuzzi, a national security analyst for NBC News and MSNBC, outspoken Trump critic and former FBI counterintelligence chief, is critical of some of Strzok's actions, but maintains that the Russia investigation Strzok launched in 2016 was totally justified. Strzok saw a confirmed threat and moved to investigate it, Figliuzzi explained. Sadly, his valid actions have been usurped by his personal conduct and judgment, which caused some to perceive the Bureau as political. But I will say it was a Vladian effort to find just the littlest bit and magnify it beyond compare, so that you take the heat off of what Trump is actually doing. It's an old trick, and it works every time. It's not going to work anymore. All right? Okay, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, double the fun. For an actor best known for buddy movies, Seth Rogen shows that his best co-star may be himself. In his new movie, An American Pickle, he plays both main characters. Based on the 2013 New Yorker short story, The Sellout, An American Pickle, it tells the tale of Herschel Greenbaum, an Eastern European immigrant who comes to America with his wife in the 19-teens. Herschel gets a job in a pickle factory, but as fate would have it, falls into a pickle barrel, only to wake up 100 years later perfectly preserved. With his wife and son long gone, Herschel discovers his only living relative is a great-grandson, Ben, an app developer living in Brooklyn. Ben invites Herschel to stay with him, but the two men quickly learn that they have very different philosophies of life. Ben, who's developing an app and expecting a big payoff, is a disappointment to Herschel, who doesn't really understand Ben's efforts. As it turns out, Herschel is a natural entrepreneur and sets up an artisan pickle stand, which becomes a huge hit with Brooklyn hipsters. Despite the family ties, the two men become rivals, with Ben determined to undermine Herschel's success. Hilarity ensues, but as the cartoonishly contrived setup sort of suggests, the movie's true calling is as a fish-out-of-water comedy that relishes taking swipes at cultural issues and especially at family expectations in a uniquely Jewish context. Rogen shows that he's becoming a versatile actor who's come a long way since Appétit movies. Director Brandon Trost makes the most of the Brooklyn setting, and Simon Rich's screenplay stays true to the themes of the original story that he authored. An American Pickle is an offbeat little film that works, maybe because it doesn't venture too deeply into weeds that are all around. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Our solar system is far from the only way to put together stars and their planets.
If you look at all the stars in our galaxy, in the Milky Way, right, more than a half of the stars are formed in multiples, meaning that there are more than one star in a system.
Astrophysicist Jehan Bey of the Carnegie Institution for Science. He has studied one of those systems with 3 stars. It's called GW Orionis, and it's freshly formed, only 1 million years old.
Yeah, it's really, really young. Yeah, it's a baby.
Bey says if you translate that 1 million-year lifespan to that of a human, it's the equivalent of a week-old baby. And how many week-old babies do you bump into?
If you just walk around your neighborhood, there's really little chance that you meet a baby who is 1 week old, right? So first of all, it's hard to find these systems. They are pretty rare.
Bey and his colleagues got lucky spotting this one. Using radio telescopes, they were able to image the star system, and they say it differs from our own solar system in more than just star count. In our solar system, for example, all 8 planets orbit the sun more or less in a single plane. Think of the sun as the center of a vinyl record, with the planets strung out along the grooves. In contrast, Bey's team discovered that the stars in this triple star system are ringed by clouds of dust in multiple warped and misaligned planes. Picture a 3-dimensional gyroscope rather than a 2-dimensional vinyl record. The observations are in the journal Science. Those rings of dust will presumably go on to form planets as the star system matures. And Bey says astronomers have indeed observed other more mature star systems with planets orbiting in these misaligned planes.
And we wanted to understand if that happens at the time those planets born, or it is some evolutionary thing over, 1 billion years.
The finding suggests that weirdly aligned planetary systems are born that way, and that stars and their embryonic planets can be all topsy-turvy, even in their infancy. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This is
an important message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. After a storm or disaster, it's important to eat only safe food. Throw away perishables like meat, poultry, fish, eggs, and leftovers stored above 40 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 hours or more. Throw away food with an unusual odor, color, or texture. Throw away food that may have come in contact with floodwater, including food in swollen, punctured, and damaged cans. When in doubt, throw it out.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Russia is actively interfering again in the 2020 election. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. And that was the conclusion of the Democratic senators contained in the 1,000-page report of the Senate Intelligence Committee released in August. The committee unanimously, on a bipartisan basis, concluded that Russia involved itself deeply in the 2016 U.S. election in order to elect Donald Trump president. There was one major point of disagreement, but not about that fact. The Republican senators emphasized in their addendum that the committee found no evidence that the Trump campaign colluded with Russia. The Democratic senators highlighted that the report itself unambiguously shows that the Trump campaign cooperated with Russia. Cooperation with Russia versus collusion with Russia? Look, it is an important issue, but it's not the critical question today. The critical question today is, how is Russia trying to influence the 2020 election? Using and manipulating social media, creating numerous false organizations and social media accounts, supporting third-party candidates who could change the outcome in closely contested swing states? More? Worse? And critically, what is the United States government doing to prevent this foreign adversary from putting its thumb on the electoral scale? A question that needs answering now. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1941. The ravages of World War II had swept across Europe. German troops had invaded Norway in April of 1940. The conditions of the Nazi occupation grew increasingly harsher. The Nazis began rationing milk, an important part of the diet of Norwegian children and workers. The rationing, however, did not apply to the German occupiers. Angered shipyard workers in Oslo walked off the job in protest. Workers from other industries joined them. 20,000 workers from 50 factories and work sites participated in the strike. The Nazi response to the uprising was predictably swift and brutal. 200 labor leaders were arrested and new Nazi chosen leaders put in their places. 27 of the arrested labor leaders and strikers were brought before a court-martial trial. Rolf Wickstrom, a welder and union steward, and Harold Viggo Hanstein, a labor lawyer, were sentenced to death for their involvement in the strike and executed. The remaining 25 strikers were convicted and sentenced to long prison sentences. Ludwig Bulin, a union railway worker, died while serving his prison sentence. So did Harry Vesely, a factory worker. Journalists were fired or arrested. Even groups like the Boy Scouts were banned. Listening to foreign broadcasts on the radio were expressly forbidden. Then radios were confiscated. In Sweden, trade unionists issued this statement in support support of their fellow Scandinavian workers. They wrote, quote, Norwegian trade unionists have fallen in the battle for Norway's freedoms and for the right of the Norwegian working class to decide for itself its own actions with the limits of Norwegian law. We honor their memory. In 1948, a memorial was placed to honor the deaths of Wickstrom and Hansteen and the workers who stood up for their country. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
I'm Mark Boulanger. As the United States celebrated Labor Day on September 7th, the country entered into the run-up to national elections scheduled for November 3rd. The country is facing a decision to re-elect Donald Trump as president or choose the Democratic candidate Joe Biden. One of the tactics Mr. Trump has been using to reduce the number of people voting in the election in the hopes of winning another term is to attack the United States Postal Service. Many people are planning to vote by mail because of the pandemic and long hours at the voting stations. In the hope that fewer people will vote and therefore help his chances to win, Mr. Trump says an increased use of mail-in ballots will cause chaos at the Postal Service. But that is not true, according to the country's postal unions. Just recently, they held a webinar to address the issue. The webinar was moderated by Keith Richardson, the president of the American Postal Workers Union, Local 1 in Chicago.
You're all reading the news and have heard about the attacks from the president as he has spoken negatively about the Postal Service and its workers. There has been a full-on assault by this administration to paint the narrative that voting by mail isn't safe and that the Postal Service and its employees are too stupid to get the job done. I'm here to tell you that that's false. The sisters and brothers who comprise the workforce of the United States Postal Service are dependable, reliable, and are at the ready to fulfill our mission on delivering the mail to the customers we serve. We're going to start with Mac. Mac, tell us, should Americans be nervous about their mail-in ballots making it in on time? If so, how far in advance should they mail them?
Well, thanks. It's good to see you, Brother Keith. I am the president of the Chicago local, or the National Association of Letter Carriers, local branch number 11. As far as mail service and the concerns that's been generated about us being able to deliver some election mail, I don't think I know it's not going to be a problem. And I may sound a bit partial in saying that, being a letter carrier, but you have to really put this in perspective. We're talking about, at the most, a couple 100 million pieces of mail. Realize during the holiday season, last Christmas, for instance, the United States Postal Service handled 2.5 billion pieces of first-class mail, including cards and packages. So if we can handle 2.5 billion pieces during our peak season, I'm quite confident that we're able to handle just a couple 100 million pieces of mail. But now, that being said, you also have to be smart about getting that election ballot back into the mail. I've ordered mine already. I'm waiting on it. When mine arrive, I'm going to put it back in the mail system. The good thing, Keith, as you know, the choice is not hard this year. And we definitely want to get those pieces back in the mail system. You get that mail to us and we'll do what we do, and that is deliver. So, no, there's nothing to worry about.
Thank you. So moving on, we're going to bring up Patrick. Can you answer the question, why is the United States Postal Service crucial for people and our democracy?
Thanks, Keith. Yeah, my name is Patrick Donovan. I'm the president, Branch 122, and the recording secretary for Local 301. Local 301 covers New England. I'm actually in Maine myself. The Postal Service is the backbone of $1.6 trillion mailing industry. Furthermore, the Postal Service plays a vital role in the lives of every American. It's required to abide by the Universal Service Obligation. The USO is there to ensure the minimum level of service to all areas of the country at an affordable price. And this affordable service is a lifeblood to many small businesses and individuals throughout the nation. What we do, our competitors won't. We deliver to every house and business, no matter the location, no matter how rural. Whether you live in New York City or Fort Kent, and that's a small town up northern Maine, right on the border of Canada, the Postal Service will deliver to your door. We also deliver to every customer, regardless of race, sex, sexual orientation, gender expression, religion, and class. We are there for everybody.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. You can listen to our features and daily newscasts on our website at radiolabor.net. I'm Mark Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Expected to be a bit cooler than our 100 or so yesterday. Looks like we're only going to get up to the low 90s to mid 90s. Winds will be out of the east-southeast at 10 to 15 miles per hour. With partly cloudy skies, we are under a smoky haze right now, a very terrible, thick smoky haze. Hopefully we have clear skies tonight with lows in the low 60, winds out of the east-northeast at 10 to 15, with mainly sunny conditions tomorrow, and then back to near record high temperatures over 100, winds out of the east-southeast at 5 to 10. We don't have an update on coronavirus cases, confirmed cases in Jackson County of Southern Oregon since yesterday was Labor Day. And so now we still stand at 864 with 3 confirmed deceased. Ragweed pollen is rated moderate outside the mothership's window right now. The air quality index is not an accurate reportage. We are experiencing right outside the mothership a very, very thick smoky haze, and it smells syrupy and icky, and you don't want to breathe it. So the parts per million here that's being reported, it feels more like it's in the 100 parts per million rather than what they are saying here, which is good, and that's not good. But it was Labor Day yesterday, and they'll update everything later on. Though barometric pressure currently is holding steady at 29.98 inches, the visibility is down to 2 miles because of that smoky haze. And relative humidity is at 20%. Wow, it's dry as dry can be. And we are under a red flag warning, so don't be shooting your guns and causing a spark. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 75 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 78 and partly cloudy. Rome is 90 degrees and sunny. Kabul is 76 and fair. Hong Kong is 78 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 82 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 64 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 58, partly cloudy, with a smoke advisory because of wildfires ringing the area. And New York, New York is 77 degrees Fahrenheit and mostly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. The Jan Zamzami of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Almost 300 Rohingya Muslims were found on a beach in Indonesia's Aceh province yesterday, Monday. After months at sea, officials said. The group arrived at the Yong Blang beach from one boat and were reported by local residents. Officials arrived and found that the Rohingya had dispersed into 3 groups after landing. We persuaded them and asked the local residents to help them until they gathered again, Sub-District military commander said. The 181 women, 100 men, and 14 children were given shelter and received help from local residents, police, military, and health providers. Now we are still waiting for further instructions from our supervisors, the military commander said. Indrika Ratwate, the director for Asia and the Pacific, the UN Refugee Agency UNHCR, said the Rohingya had survived about 7 months at sea in desperate conditions, with some needing medical treatment. About 330 are understood to have embarked on the journey in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh in February. Over 30 are estimated to have died en route. The group tried repeatedly to disembark over more than 200 days at sea, but were not permitted to land.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Joris Caramano of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A leading opposition activist in Belarus was held on the border after she resisted an attempt by authorities to force her to leave the country, part of the government efforts to end a month of protest against the re-election of the country's authoritarian leader. Maria Koloneskova, a member of the Coordination Council created by the opposition to facilitate talks with longtime leader Alexander Lukashenko on a transition of power, was detained on Monday in the capital, Minsk, along with 2 other council members. Today, early, they were driven to the Ukrainian border where authorities told them to cross into Ukraine. Koloneskova refused and remained on the Belarusian side of the border in custody of Belarusian authorities. 2 other council members, Ivan Kratskov and Antov Rodnov, crossed into the Ukraine. Some reports said that Koloneskova ripped up her passport to avoid being forced to move to the Ukraine. Anton Bechkaskovsky, spokesman for Belarus's Border Guard Committee, confirmed that Koloneskova is in the custody of Belarusian authorities, but refused to give any details of what happened on the border. Belarus has applied similar tactics with other opposition figures, seeking to end a month of demonstrations against the re-election of Lukashenko in a vote that protesters and the world see as rigged. Lukashenko has ruled the country for 26 years, relentlessly stifling dissent and keeping most of the economy in state hands, meaning his own. Okay, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio does broadcast on, and we're going to meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.